The Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH, is the largest one of its kind in Canada. For over 150 years, Queen Street West has been home to this mental health facility, with particular expertise on mood disorders, substance abuse, anxiety and personality disorders. When the Provincial Lunatic Asylum was built in the mid-1800s, it rose on what was then the outskirts of Toronto. The paternalistic thinking at the time was that lunatics needed a safe asylum, in a quiet pastoral setting far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. CAMH is committed to redeveloping the 27-acre site on Queen Street West as an urban village, changing its institutional character and physically integrating it with the surrounding neighborhood. Working with an award-winning team of architects known as the Community Care Consortium, this group is composed of 3 Toronto architectural firms, KPMB Architects, Montgomery Sesame Architects, and Kearns Mancini Architects. With the first 2 phases of development already on their way, the final phase is anticipated to be completed by 2020. The redevelopment project aims to deliver a new model of care and provide a healthy environment that promotes recovery. The redevelopment project proposes to integrate CAMH with its surroundings by extending the existing street network through the site, creating new public parks, and most importantly, by adding a mix of non-CAMH uses onto the site. When complete, the new urban village will contain roughly an equal proportion of hospital and mixed-use development blocks. Ultimately, the urban village is to be welcoming and comfortable for everyone: CAMH clients, members of the community, and CAMH staff. The main objectives. This thesis aims to analyze the pre-existing revitalization proposal for CAMH and its surrounding neighborhood, to provide additional guidelines for effective execution of the proposed phases of development, ensuring a patient-centered approach, to recognize the unique platform for interaction that this landscape will provide for healthcare staff, patients and their families, and the local community, to address the needs of this unique cohort of patients and improve their therapeutic journey whilst maintaining a pragmatism that facilitates institutional operation, to create an environment that is non-hostile and functional, that provides both a protective barrier from the urban environment whilst preserving its vital connections with the society, to actively integrate the site into the local community by implementing permeable boundaries between the institution and its surrounding neighborhood, therefore breaking the cycle of social stigmatization to overcome the obstacles to patient repatriation into the community and encourage social awareness. The most crucial challenge for the redevelopment plans must therefore be the prioritization of the therapeutic aspects of the design to try and create a balanced proposal in which the functional purpose of the landscape is not sacrificed at the expense of aesthetics. The problem. Canada has a population of approximately 35 million people. 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness in their lifetime, and the remaining 4 will have a friend, family member, or colleague who will. $51 billion is the estimated cost of mental illness to the Canadian economy in terms of healthcare and lost productivity, $34 billion of which belongs to Ontario alone. According to the World Health Organization, depression will be the single biggest medical burden on health by 2020. Inpatient stay often risks isolation and institutionalization of the patient by removing them from their familiar surroundings and distancing them from the society in which they live. More importantly, and perhaps often overlooked, is the obstacles to later repatriation into the society, with the risk of non-compliance and relapse creating a vicious cycle. The institution and its architectural setting can be the prism glass through which the patients view and understand their illness, as well as build a connection with the staff and ultimately envisage the path to recovery.
Environmental degradation and alienation from nature are not inevitable consequences of modern life, but rather failures in how we have deliberately chosen to design our buildings and our cities.
Beauty is our word for the perfection of those qualities of environment that have contributed the most to human survival.
Great architects have intuitively sensed these things without probably even articulating or being able to articulate why they did what they did. It just seemed right.
If you look at it in terms of its negative, if we're deprived of the opportunity to affiliate with nature, it also affects us. If we were in a room that had no windows, that had just artificial light and processed air, basically you wouldn't want to be there for very long. And if you were there for very long, if somehow you couldn't escape from that room, you would start to have a kind of a sensory deprivation.
We tend to think of cities and nature as being these kind of polar opposites, when in fact we need to think about the concept of a city as being more like a garden, full of nature, bountiful.
We grow as children by interacting with nature and learning about the world and ourselves, and when we cut that off, we are limiting a child's development.
My message to architects would be that if they do their job well, then they really are partners with the doctors and the nurses who do the healing.
The solution: limit the exposure to environmental stress. This includes noise, light, color, space distractions, and crowding. Provide privacy without isolation and confinement. Ensure an adequate level of environmental stimulation to prevent sensory deprivation or overstimulation, which could impact their mental state. Promote self-direction and individual responsibility. Enable a sense of control and empowerment. Encourage effective interaction with the staff. Encourage social interaction and engagement. Provide access to nature. High dependency zones. These spaces are occupied by CAMH's inpatients who suffer from an acute mental illness such as severe anxiety, personality disorders, and psychosis. They require a higher level of care and more intensive therapy. Emphasis should be predominantly on the medical utility of the space rather than aesthetics. Respect for individuality and privacy of the patients should be maintained without compromising the operational realities of close observation, safety, and security. An essential component to these spaces should be the secure access to the exterior, whether a courtyard, fenced area, or elevated screen porch. Most importantly, the landscape should reinforce the sense of stability, logic, order, and familiarity for the patients. Moderate zones. Semi-permeable zones. They are intended for use by CAMH's patients who do not require staff supervision and can use such spaces for group therapies, relaxation, and family visits throughout the day. These landscapes are designed to facilitate programming routines for the patients and help their transition into the community. Spaces should be multifunctional to accommodate a range of activities such as outdoor therapy and gardening and other treatment modalities. Permeable zones. This transitional zone is the major catalyst in creating permeable boundaries between the CAMH patients and the community. These spaces include areas such as community gardens, greenhouses, open plazas, treatment malls, and public parks within CAMH.
The smell of any flowers, the fact that flowers draw birds, attract butterflies, the seasonal changes of colors and texture that's related to any kind of planting. All of those sensations evoke emotional responses that actually are very therapeutic for everyone, let alone people who actually have difficulty in their daily life to access these features of the outdoors. I really think it has to be some sort of awareness, almost a policy, where every major public institution, as it develops its own new building, contributes a part of its own land or property and devote it to the community at large. CAMH at the very outset of, since 1999, has determined that they want to engage a very consultative process to implement their master plan. I remember one client in particular, and she was in there for severe eating disorder. And people with those issues quite often have difficulties in thinking about food, thinking about basically going on to the next day, giving themselves nourishment. What gave her hope and optimism was actually being able to grow a plant. Her sole being plant that she had in her bedroom was the element that gave her hope to sustain herself from day to day during her treatment while she was there. You know, oftentimes when I talk about how stressful our daily lives are, we work, we go home, but we also, crave for that third place where we can actually unwind and relax. In a fair and just society that's treating everybody in a very democratic way, the public realm, the public green space in particular, I think it's absolutely the most essential part of urban design, urban planning, regardless of the size of the city and the scale of the community in terms of density and so on. That small sort of postage stamp of a piece of park or green space is absolutely paramount, I think, for the general health and wellness of all of us living here.